Thank you so much for being here. It's a pleasure to see you and talk to you. Can you hear me okay? I just want to make sure I've got my...
Yeah.
Okay, great.
I hear you.
So obviously this has been such a time for everyone as people, as humans, and as business leaders. And, you know, I think Birchbox is such a unique company, has such an iconic brand. Even in its short history, you know, it's really built itself as such a part of the fabric of people's lives. And, you know, as co-founder and CEO, you've had to make some really important decisions, right, in the midst of all of this. So we're going to get into that. The name of our conversation is Strength and Purpose. And I think that's really apropos, given how you've basically taken everything, I would argue, and you can tell us and walk us through this, the foundation of Birchbox, and sort of leaned on that, even as you've moved into a new reality for your business and for your community. So why don't you just kick us off by talking about, you know, pre-COVID, you know, bring us back to before 2020 changed so dramatically for all of us. Where was Birchbox in its journey?
Yeah, so we are just approaching our 10-year anniversary, and we have been through basically every business cycle that you can imagine, which is, it feels like a lot, but it also feels like such a gift that I've experienced hypergrowth and the insanity that comes from that. I've experienced severe supply chain issues. I've experienced incredible competition coming in and fiercely changing the landscape. I've experienced a lot of huge changes in the funding environments and in venture capitalists actually liking e-commerce companies, not liking e-commerce companies, liking consumer companies, not liking consumer companies. And, you know, it's obviously, or maybe it's not obvious, but it's, as I've gone through this journey, I've increasingly been focused on how do we reclaim the decision-making power in this business, because we really set out to do something that has integrity, and a lot of that can get lost in the journey of hypergrowth and in the journey of, you know, is it in fashion? Is it cool? Is it something that is lasting? Is it a fad? And I'd argue that the core inside of Birchbox could never be a fad, which is that it is so exciting to think that you could have a best friend to help you navigate any category, right? And ours is beauty. But the insight was every person would love to have a best friend who knew what they were doing, that helps them find joy and spend money efficiently. And I've never quite understood why there was a question about whether that could be a fad, but because, you know, it's fun to speak in hyperbole and to think about subscription is good, subscription is bad, you know, that's kind of what it was like for a while, being knocked around. So the last, I guess, like 18 months has been a lot about reclaiming our ability to do things the way we want to do it. And it's been experimenting with things like Walgreens and trying to understand offline, which was a really big part of 2019. But it also was a big change in the business when we decided to sell our French business, which was really large. And we had an unsolicited offer that changed kind of the capital structure of the business and gave us a new opportunity to kind of take hold again of what we wanted to do and how we wanted to build it. Wasn't the way that we expected to do it, but it happened that way. So in 2019, as that deal was closing, we decided we have this opportunity to really focus on, you know, obviously the integrity of what we do. That does start with how we treat our people in the team, and also how the consumer feels and understands our intent of the product. But in order to do that, we did have to start with layoffs and say, like, okay, we're gonna change the size of the team and really focus on simplifying the way we work and having stricter priorities around what we do. Operating a bit more globally also with our European team members, instead of kind of repeating everything in every market, starting to work more together and having some joint positions that operate on a global basis. So we, I guess, like took that, you know, that's a challenging moment in any business, and honestly, not the first time Birchbox had to do it. But we were fortunate in the sense that we did that before we knew what was coming. And we had that discipline like built into the business, and we were coming, you know, into 2020 on a growing business where all of our key metrics were getting better. And we knew that this was like the next thing we had to do to really just, again, take the control back of how we wanted to build. And then, the coronavirus happened. And the way that I would describe it is, at first, we had no idea how it was going to impact things. You could really tell yourself a story that it could go in any direction. And once we saw that it wasn't having a negative impact on the business in terms of just like the fundamentals of acquisition, churn, cost of acquisition, we realized like it's our duty and also our desire to then do what we can to give back, and to really be a part of this moment in time.
So it sounds like obviously when COVID hit, there was that initial period of blocking and tackling, right? Just as a business, clearly that's just a foundational first step, and I think to your point, there was so many questions, still so many questions that exist around our future and moving forward. But in the moment, you had to sort of ensure that everything was aligned and in a good place. Then talk about, which makes a lot of sense, talk then about how you needed to figure out how you could most authentically, because I know that word is used too much, but it's a useful word for a reason, basically be supportive of your community, and maybe talk about your community first, because I think that's interesting in terms of how you think about it, talk about it, identify it. Yeah. And then how did you find the next need that you needed to meet within that community?
Sure.
And beyond.
Yeah. So, talking about who our customer is and who we really built Birchbox for, I think it's probably one of the least understood things about our business. And it starts with me and my co-founder, who were consumers of beauty that did not love beauty or find it that important or think it was the end all be all. And we really didn't understand why, because that wasn't our priority, we had to have either a boring experience or a challenging experience, where you're either left to do the thing you've been doing for decades, or you're left to navigate it yourself, waste a lot of money, or spend a lot of time understanding things. And that just didn't feel right for something that's supposed to be discretionary and who was marketed to us as being fun. And for us, we were like, this isn't fun. This is work to consume well, or you feel dumb, or you feel like someone's pressure selling you. So, that's really who we were as consumers. And we woke up kind of halfway into this journey, about 4 years in, and realized that the entire industry is focused on a consumer who's obsessed with beauty, who really does like to navigate all the choices, who does find it fun. And that makes up 20% at best of the market. And the rest of us are just like semi-invited to participate, but no one's priority. So the majority of consumers who have a relationship with beauty, who use beauty, are not anyone's priority. And the user experience in the industry is not being designed for us, which made no sense to me. We are the majority, right? That makes no sense, that no one's considering how we want to spend money, the relationship we want to have with the category. And then on top of that, we looked at our customers that were this person, this everyday consumer. We call it the casual beauty and grooming consumer. And we used credit card data to understand what they were doing before Birchbox and beauty and what they were doing after Birchbox and beauty. And we saw basically that Birchbox doubled their spend in beauty in a year. And we realized that, it's pretty intuitive. If you design a user experience for a specific customer, they can have a positive experience spending more, right? They can actually change their behavior in a way that's positive and accretive to the industry.
Sure.
We just became obsessed with this because the idea of creating incremental value for consumers and the industry became a lot more compelling than taking an existing pie and trying to carve a slice. So we've just been focused on baking our own pie of new consumers who do not have to be obsessed, who do not have to spend in the same way that the obsessed consumer does, but who are valuable and who are many. And that's who we're building for.
So when you, that being said and understood, obviously then your whole, it's in your DNA to identify need. So now COVID hits and suddenly you identified a need. And so tell us a little bit about what you did as far as the donations that you made and why you felt that was such a necessary step for you.
Yeah. Look, I think it's tough when you're in a category that is so discretionary to really fully understand your place, because this is a very serious thing that's happening for people. Sure. And we weren't in a real place to impact like PPE, and we knew that. But we are in the business of bringing people little moments of joy. And that's where we really started our focus is, okay, let's talk to our community about how we can bring moments of joy to the people who are on the front line. It was very grassroots. It was happening, organically at first. And then we organized around it and said, we can do this at scale. We can afford to really do this. And so we started asking about bigger organizations, bigger groups. Can we drop pallets of boxes just to brighten someone's day, just to give them, a moment of joy in what must be a really stressful and horrendous every day. And the community just really came and gave us so many places to donate to. So we were able to donate almost 50,000 boxes there. And then again, because we have to be mindful of like what's happening in our business, as we saw that our business was continuing to prove okay, we decided we're going to also donate profits. So we thought through what are all the organizations that we can donate to. And, there was actually an overwhelming amount of organizations that were receiving donations. So we wanted to be really thoughtful about who we could donate to and how it's going to help. We had worked with Baby to Baby in the past, and we knew that was an organization that had incredible integrity, giving, the products that you need when you are a parent. And that obviously this is is particularly stressful time having a baby right now. I'm sure you have friends that have gone through that too. It's kind of unimaginable.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
Unimaginable. So we decided, we're going to focus there. Specifically, mothers are a really big part of our demo, obviously. And we, we were able to decide like we're going to actually give company profits away. We gave 10% of the profits in May to that organization. And this is going to be an ongoing thing. And that's how we talk about it at Birchbox. In general, this isn't about, being participating and building the world we want to live in. This isn't about social media. This isn't about, just doing something of the moment, but we are all agents in creating the reality that we want, which I think for so many of us is a reality that is about sharing, wealth and about perpetuating, love and good intentions. And, when this is going to be happening to our world for so long, this is about an ongoing thing. How can we continue to participate, whether it's in trying to create job opportunities, whether it's in donations? It's going to be ongoing.
Yeah, I love the words that you've used, words like thoughtful and integrity. And it sounds like everything you did was very intentional. You know what I mean? I think, and it's no discredit to anybody, but I think there would, it was easy for there to be a knee-jerk reaction to kind of what was happening in the world. And obviously finding that for not just your company, but any brand or business, to try to find that place that, to your point, was germane to who you were before all this happened was just so key, right? I mean, you had to just be true to what you stood for historically, and yet still bring added value and serve a new need that had arisen. Can you just talk a little bit about what kind of like internal conversations were you having? How was conversation happening internally within the company, within the organization? Like how much time was spent? Because it sounds like, you were able to sort of spring into action pretty quickly. Can you just give any insight into what was happening behind the scenes there?
I think, there are some benefits to being a relatively new business and the way that we are used to communicating and the comfort with digital. So we immediately all started working remotely, I guess the second week of March. And we had the tools to do that between Slack and Google Hangouts. Yeah, I think the way that we have used Slack has probably been the most wonderful evolution of the business during the remote time, because though we obviously pride ourselves on transparency and everyone having access, like the reality is there are meetings and there are doors and we're not recording them and posting them. Whereas when we have initiatives in Slack, everybody can participate, contribute, drop in and see what's happening, add value that way. And I found that to be just really powerful for myself and for everybody, that the decisions we're making, and because they don't all happen in the 30 or 1 hour meeting, they're happening ongoing, are viewable by everybody. There's accountability that changes. There's a momentum and excitement that changes when everybody is really feeling a part of it. So which honestly, it did happen relatively quickly. We were able to have those video conferences, but then continue the conversation all day, every day. You know?
So talk a little bit about, I think I don't think you mentioned it yet, the 10/10 partnership that you did and sort of the why behind that and what it was, obviously.
Yeah. So, again, thinking about how we can support what's happening, I think we all know that there's just so many different ways of thinking about support. And one is businesses are being impacted, obviously service businesses. And if you're not aware, 10/10 is primarily a nail salon, definitely has product too that you can buy, but was primarily a nail salon, a service business. Friend of the company, good friend of our president of the US. And, in thinking about this impacting that business, we just wanted to see, is there something we could do that's good for us and also helps your business? So we created an at-home manicure kit. We just moved really quickly with inventory they had to try to raise awareness for them as they're moving into new channels like Target, but also, to just try to do a small thing that we can, right? If everybody tries to do a little bit to help some of these businesses that we really do want to continue as consumers exist, then hopefully they will get through what could be a really devastating change in their revenue with not as big of a change in their cost basis. So, that was really it, just trying to do what we could to help a little bit of the gap.
Yeah, absolutely. I think obviously you talked about what happened during, the pandemic and how that changed everything so dramatically. And it feels like if you chart the course, it was the pandemic hit, recession, hit. I think marketers, companies, brands were kind of finding their footing, right? Had finally gotten to that place where they were at least able to find a place where they had found that relevance, had found that messaging, had found that action. And then, following the death of George Floyd, there was certainly the movement kicked in, the push for racial justice. And I think a lot of companies obviously had to figure out, what they stood for, identify and share that and vocalize that and be very present in that conversation. So with that happening, how did you navigate that? What were your decisions around that?
Yeah, I'd say we're still navigating both, but the latter has been a lot bigger for us as a business, because I think as many people are reflecting on, it does first start with reflecting on what is our responsibility as someone who isn't Black, as someone who hasn't endured the day-to-day of this. And I'm definitely experiencing a big change in how I see my responsibility and how I see the place that we're supposed to play in standing up against racism and against the institution of it, versus being more of the way we've defined being an ally in the past, which is not being evil, not being racist, not having those ideals, but not recognizing how participating in the institution of it is still perpetuating it. About it. So I think, that's a journey and one that I want to face, continue to face. And so it's been a process of how do we invite the conversation was the first thing at the company. How do we make it okay to bring this conversation? So we had an all hands meeting where I was so scared having it, suggesting it, because I thought, a lot of people thought no one will talk, but we're 30 people would speak, questioning things, reflecting on some of their own experiences and actions openly. And then we developed, created a committee, which I know many people are, that we're referring to as a steering committee, because this is not a, strategic initiative for 2020. This is not, a thing that starts and then stops. This is a forever thing. But like everything, we have to have clear targets, and we have to measure our ability to hit those targets. And then we have to continue to operate and move if we learn that we can do better than that, if we learn that we're going to have to change our strategy. So it needs a steering committee. I'm the head of the committee. All of my leadership team is on that committee, and then other volunteers from the company. And then from there, we have subcommittees, because the way that we approached this was, of course, we're a consumer-facing brand. We work with brands. We can support Black-owned brands, absolutely. But we spend a lot of money on a lot of things, right? It is not just the merchandise. It is obviously the people that we work with that are full-time, the agencies we work with, our logistics partners, our packaging partners. There's so much to think about in terms of how we can have an impact. So we have subcommittees that are addressing things like the hiring side, the logistics and operational side of our business, the merchandising side of our business, the marketing side of our business, so that we are really thinking about how are we deploying resources in a new way that will be a change of the trajectory. And I guess it's not always resources, right? Sometimes it is protest, sometimes it is participating and standing up against something. But it's in a lot of different areas of the business. And so that's how we've approached it. And we have a plan to have, a 30% penetration of how we spend our resources in Black-owned businesses. And we're developing kind of the quarterly view of how we can march towards that in the next 3 years.
I love that you're putting parameters. I mean, you're quantifying it. You're putting benchmarks in place. I mean, you're actually putting some rigor around growth and success in this area. I mean, for lack of better terms. I mean, just like everything else, it has to be built into the business in that measurable way. As you said, 10 years old. Arguably, you were you're sort of the old guard now, arguably, of the subscription box. Services. And so you have influence there, right? I mean, you do have an opportunity, obviously, to, as a founder, as, one of the preeminent models of this kind of business to shape the future, right? To shape what, not just what you do, but what your peers do and what others in the industry do. How do you think about that, in terms of, being visible, being vocal, chatting with other, frankly, with peer companies and even competitors? Like, how do you sort of come together as an industry and think about best practices for moving forward collectively?
I mean, that is exactly what we're talking about right now, is how can we not see this as a moment that like we're trying to do something differentiated, because we have a nice size business, but we don't have enough sway to actually change things. And we really do need to come together as an industry if we're really going to make changes. So what we are thinking about, again, in these categories, is how can we have other companies joining us, because there are really big things to tackle. One of the biggest ones is shipping. I'm sure you've seen like some of the shipping providers' affiliation with racist organizations. And it's hard when both shipping providers that are the predominant shipping providers are involved. So how can we collectively come together, whether it's hiring lobbyists, whether it's, again, holding up the third shipper provider that potentially doesn't, we still have to make sure they don't. And collectively move our business so that it actually has an impact. Like I said, I think we could have some impact, but we're not so seismic that our movement is going to be enough of a voice in getting change to happen. So yes, we're doing that outreach. We're writing those letters. We're inviting people to join us. But we're also doing the research and making sure that we are understanding the situation and we understand the avenues of how we can either change the way we spend our resources or fight the kind of system that is there in order to try to change their affiliation. So that is still, happening a few weeks into all of this. And I expect that it will continue to unfold. And look, I expect that we won't do everything perfectly. And that's one of the hardest things about this, is just saying we have to be brave. There is going to be criticism. We are going to be called hypocrites. There are going to be moments when, of course, we don't intend to, but we don't realize that there's other things that we didn't see that were happening with potential people we work with. And that just can't slow us down. So we're just trying to know that that's a part of us and prepared.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a work in progress, right? It's everybody's learning through this period together. So there's, that I think there's an acceptance and an awareness and an understanding of that on the part of all businesses. I know we're getting low on time, but as you think forward, what in this new reality, what is product innovation, product innovation or service innovation? I mean, how do you start thinking about, how is that defined as you move forward?
I mean, for Birchbox, there's just such a a huge opportunity because look, I mean, the beauty industry is an industry that's still over 80% offline that relies a lot on testers. And let's be clear, testers are over. Testers are over for the foreseeable at least couple of years, right? I mean, no one's going to take something someone else has used and touch it and put it on their face. That is not happening. And I think that obviously opens up a big opportunity for businesses like ours, which are really about trial and about helping people find products through trial, through sampling. And we're so focused on thinking about that, both in terms of how does that impact our merchandising and assortment? How does that impact how we talk about what Birchbox is for? And that's kind of table stakes. But the other innovation that work has to always happen around being relevant as the context changes, that work is very possible to do together digitally. I mean, whether it's changing the user experience digitally, whether it's evolving where we're putting resources so customers can have more human interactions. I mean, we're having all of those strategic conversations digitally, and the planning conversations, the budget conversations. It hasn't really disrupted the flow of innovation. It's more that there's a new context to consider, right? And people's day-to-day lives are changing. And I think probably not surprisingly, we have a vested interest in changing the penetration of beauty to be more e-commerce. Not because we think it only has to be e-commerce, but because we think it could be a lot bigger than 15% online, right?
Yeah.
So that's an opportunity for us.
Absolutely. Well, what do you think about the entry? I mean, obviously, we've seen so many companies, retailers historically, who had very limited e-commerce capabilities, just completely diving into that space. Any thoughts about that? How it both presents an opportunity and challenge for you all?
I think, again, one of the interesting things about Birchbox is that every beauty retailer out there is focused on such a different customer. On a consumer who's obsessed with beauty. And I think that that's always what continues to really help us stay relatively unfazed by those actions, is that we're speaking to a different consumer and we're generating incrementality, right? We're not trying to get your replenishment order of your moisturizer. We're trying to help you change your behavior and then capture that purchase from you. So it is a bit of a different activity. I think it's a different consideration of both who you're targeting and what's the user experience for that consumer. So, even historically, as we've had pretty stiff competition, it really hasn't had an impact on how we are seeing our business in that general sense. So I think we have to always have our eyes open and see what's happening, but more people helping the customer get comfortable shopping digitally for this category is a great opportunity for Birchbox, and that's how I see it.
Yeah, absolutely. Any technologies that you're paying particular attention to as we move forward? I mean, your thoughts around AR, VR, AI, what do you feel is going to be really interesting for your business moving forward?
Yeah, I think everything as it relates to photo recognition and the continued integrity of how you can use photo to get data is going to be really valuable, just because, again, it's more about a seamless user experience. Photo, video, but to collect data, not necessarily to have an augmented reality experience, but to help understand what you're seeing and what you're looking at and make that discovery process more seamless. And I think the technology that helps have human-like interactions that are efficient, right? Whether that's bots and the messaging and kind of using machine learning to understand what people are asking for and giving them better service. And still pairing that with humans in the end. But I think everything that helps kind of virtual retail staff be superhuman and personal is very obsessive. How do you make humans who are so valuable in experiences that are discretionary, how do you make them superhuman? How do you empower them with the data that's going to give you the most relevant advice or the most relevant service? So those are the technologies that I'm most focused on.
Very exciting. Any last thoughts as you move forward? I mean, it'll be interesting to see how the rest of the year continues, how consumer habits continue to change and morph vis-a-vis shopping online, comfortable in digital environments, and certainly, as we continue to track consumer sentiment and shifts, certainly around just personal feelings about things, but everything that's happening culturally and in society. So, what are the top 3 things that are keeping you up at night and that you're keeping very close eye on as you move forward?
I mean, it's going to sound like a broken record, but I'm just very focused on the integrity behind everything we do. That includes 100%, the movement that's happening in Black Lives Matter, and ensuring that we are being thoughtful, that we're following through, that we're not losing steam on that, but also the integrity of the just core experience of Birchbox and how we're continuing to provide a more relevant experience in a time where customers have always had so many decisions of how to spend their money, and that's not lost on me.
Now more so than ever, those decisions are very concerted, I'm sure.
So continuing to think about how are we driving value for the consumers and understanding how that value has changed, right? And context is everything, and how you're making decisions about where to put resources in the business, and continuing to tap into what are the different lenses, perspectives that are happening in the world, so we can ensure that our product is relevant and useful and still delightful is really, it's a lot. It's always been ever changing, but I think we're seeing something unique happen right now, which feels like the change is acute, and we need to be ready for that.
Well, Katia, I can't thank you enough. This has been an awesome conversation. So many great examples and anecdotes as far as what you've been through, what you're leading through, where the company's going, and I think a lot of great takeaways for everybody who's watching. So thank you so much for joining me, and I look forward to talking to you again sometime.
Likewise, thank you.
Take care.
Bye.